Well, indeed. Actually, I have been at work this morning, and maybe it would help to introduce myself as not wearing my official work hat today. I am a climate officer for one of the 40-odd county associations to local councils. I am a newly climate officer to Warwickshire and West Midlands Association of Local Councils, so very much in tune with the great collaboration where encouraging councils and communities to work together. And that is my day job. Um, I am also a rower. So I've put myself down as a British Rowing Sustainability Volunteer because actually that's something I do in my spare time. I row on the local stretch of river, and do you know what? I really like to multitask. And why not? If I'm rowing on a river and I know about flooding and I know about water quality, why wouldn't I talk to my boat club about sustainability and climate change? And why wouldn't I get involved when British Rowing looked for volunteers? Why wouldn't I put my hand up and say, absolutely, I'd like to get involved? So all of these things have come together. I am a huge believer in the power of sport, how it can transform communities. So when Warwickshire Sustainable Warwickshire podcast was looking for volunteers or themes, topics, I said, well, what about sustainability in sport? So there will be a link to the podcast recently. Oh, crikey. Oh, a dragon boater. I will definitely be talking to you later. And perhaps you can contribute to this discussion. I'm going to give a very quick outline of, as I say, who I am. Climate officer, rower, sports person, because as I explained in my podcast, I grew up in Canada where we had big open spaces to play a lot of neighborhood sports. So again, the power of community, it was community sport. It wasn't, we didn't have to pay for it. It was on our doorstep. And coming back to the UK in my teens, I've found out that actually that isn't the case for everybody. Wow, I can see there's lots of athletes within this room. So we've got a lot to talk about. Over the last couple of years, with a focus on climate change, a personal interest, declaration, I'm also a trustee of Rubbish Friends, which is a known as a litter picking group, but we are a litter prevention group. And knowing, again, thinking about the river, how much physical pollution is present in our river as well as chemical pollution. So all of these hats came together. I hope you'll have a chance to listen to the podcast from Sustainable Warwickshire, in which we have two clubs present. So Stratford upon Avon Boat Club, and that would be me, but also Philongley Cricket Club, who have transformed their third pitch for nature and for people. So they were a fantastic local example in Warwickshire of what a sports club can do when it puts its mind to it. They have also taken that to the next level. So they looked at their field and said, how can we make space for nature? But that's led to other conversations around sustainability. And interestingly enough, kit came up as an extension of the conversation. So there will be a link to the Warwickshire podcast later, and I hope you'll have a chance to listen to it. What there isn't provided that I would like to circulate is a briefing on all of the links and all of the resources that were discussed as part of the conversation. And I've pitched that to Warwickshire County Council. So that is forthcoming. But between yesterday and today, I didn't have a chance to put that together. What I have done is put together some slides to set the scene. And hopefully we can have a really good discussion after that. As I say, I'm filling in, and I wish that I'd had a full presentation going from international stage through to what can be done at grassroots level, but I don't have it. So without further ado, why don't I introduce my slides, start the topic of the conversation, see what you guys think. I have a pile of resources that I can happily share with you, and we can also build. What I'd like to do is build up this conversation to perhaps revisit in a couple of months' time, because with your feedback, I think this presentation could be really powerful. I have made a note of who has got a sustainability strategy and who hasn't. I'd really like to know whether you think you could approach your local clubs, and if so, what would you need? So these slides are a starting point for that conversation. And please feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm trying not to look at it at the moment because otherwise I'll get distracted from how to share my screen. So let me go to sharing the screen, which is here. Can you see? Oh, can you see my screen, everyone? Graham?
We certainly can.
Great. Okay. Climate change is disrupting play. I think we know that already. I'm not going to ask everyone to show your hands, but if everyone could nod vigorously if you've watched any of the sports over the last couple of weeks. Yes, you have. In which case, let me move on to the next slide. It says trying to work it out from beginning, from current slide. Oh, please go on to the next slide, everyone. There it is. Excuse me. Climate change is already disrupting play. Paris Olympics, I'm going to ask one person who's a very sporty person to say, did you see any examples of sport being disrupted in the games just in the last couple of weeks? Feel free to shout out.
Triathlon.
Yeah. Anyone
Yeah.
else?
There was nearly an issue about the triathlon about the water quality in the River Seine, wasn't it? It nearly didn't happen. Yeah.
Put off several times, indeed. So let's just say Paris was preparing for that already, and there's obviously mitigation and adaptation. But the fact is, the crowds are there for one day, and what happens when one day's event is cancelled? You know, sport is very aware that it's going to lose its audience pretty quickly. I've given a couple of examples here from the European Climate Agency of how interregional big events are being suspended, cancelled because of extreme weather, but also how extreme weather is affecting the athletes. And BASIS, which is the British Association for Sustainability in Sport, is collecting information about how athletes are being impacted. But it's a concern of international athletes is how they're going to cope with extreme weather conditions. And then you have to think about all of the volunteers and referees as well. Wildfires, I think we all know that wildfires are in Greece happening. Air quality, it's not just water quality, it's air quality as well. So these are just a couple of examples on the international arena. I then have more than a few examples of nationally. Just last month, I was watching the news, and interestingly, although they didn't talk about climate change, they did actually talk about Worcester Cricket Club and the fact that actually the venue is looking at moving because they have been flooded out between, over the last season. The actual venue itself has been flooded out, and the damage, the cost to repair is becoming unmanageable. So again, I put links into the fact that the cricket club wants to stay in its ground. Is it possible? Boat race, I hope that people are aware of the water quality issues that have been raised. And I also had a look at the Game Changer report, which is really interesting for those of us that link climate change and sport, that actually the most popular sports being hit are golf, football, and cricket. And when you think about where they play their sport, either if they're coastal, I think it's not very difficult to make the link there. What is happening coastally? When you think about cricket on flood meadows, they're being affected there. And football itself is being affected also. Grassroots level, I know of examples locally. Just one of the parishes within our patch, Welford-on-Avon, a mother told me, well, my son hasn't been able to play for the last 3 months because the pitches are flooded. Rowing, there's a major regatta coming up at the end of the month at Ross on Wye. Well, Wye has got its own issues on water quality. I'm not sure if you have heard of Friends of the River Wye and the various campaigns that are going on there in terms of chemical pollution, but water levels, just full stop, will stop play. It was cancelled 2 years ago. The regatta was cancelled 2 years ago because there wasn't enough water to row on, and that is the concern coming up in a couple of weeks for that regatta again. It does have a tendency to either be too much water or too little water, but there are plenty of examples of regattas cancelled over the last few years because of flooding. So I would love to know out of the group here whether you have had any conversations with your local sports clubs or indeed leisure services. Because same thing, you've got outdoor pitches, whether it's the football pitches just outside, or indeed just even transport. For us, being in a rural district, it's quite difficult for residents to access sometimes because of weather conditions or because of public transport. So those are some of the things that came to mind as I looked at these. On the world stage, so interestingly, I have observed that the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN has set them and sport has taken those on. The Directorate General for Climate Action, to me, at national level, but also at community level, sport really does have the power to bring people and whole communities together. It does support healthy lifestyles. It brings people together, building their community. For me, again, social cohesion, the fact that all ages and abilities can get together around a pitch to enjoy the game, to volunteer for the game, to play the game, is amazing for a community. And this brought me on, though, to the next slide. Sport has got such a platform and reach. So it's affected by it, but it can also play a role in it. And this is where I'm always thinking, what are the solutions? So again, I'd love to have this conversation. Is it a villain or is it a victim? And if so, you think about that, but also, could it be a hero? It's a villain because when you think about mass sporting events, they are extremely carbon costly. Transport, maintaining stadiums, the waste, certainly on the international arena, when you think about the transport where so many are traveling to a venue. So it is a villain. It's also a victim because clearly climate change is affecting play. But locally, can it be a hero? What can we do to enable sports clubs to actually play their part in tackling climate change? So that brings me on to the sustainability strategy. Last year, just to give you an example, we started talking about water quality testing in our patch in Stratford-upon-Avon. The boat club was uncertain about taking part because it was seen as a political topic. Of course, that made me think, well, I'm sure that there are other boat clubs involved in water quality testing and other organisations. Interestingly, Henley-on-Thames has been a front runner in this area. And certainly the boat club and other organisations, environmental organisations, have joined forces. And certainly the boat club here in Stratford-upon-Avon has absolutely now got a sustainability group, and we are talking about water quality testing because it has such an impact on so many sports. It's not just the boat club here that's affected. We have kayaking, we have sea cadets, we have paddle boarders, we have a lot of people and the general public, may I say, and businesses that rely on the water. So started doing some research on sustainability strategy, and there were two in existence that I knew of last year. ECB was working on theirs and launched it at the end of last year. British Rowing launched theirs earlier this year in March. Sport England launched theirs in May. I have since found out that actually the Royal Yachting Association were way ahead of the game, and they published theirs quite a few years ago. Directly from their sustainability strategy, I think is really interesting, because if you read the slide, they talk about physical activity and health and well-being is being affected now, and it will be hugely affected in the future. So it's talking about major events and mass participation, but I would argue already that is happening at grassroots level. And when we think about future generations, what's the pipeline of talent? What's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to our local cricket clubs, our local football clubs, our youth sections? Already, certainly in our rural district, a lot of the youth sections have faded away because of lack of funding. If you add climate change on top of that, how are we going to get these clubs back? So we're coming back to that. Can they be a hero? Yes, they can, with funding and with support and with resources. And I hope that local communities can, particularly environmental groups, can see a way to joining up with their local sports club and seeing how we can support each other for the benefit of our local community. So that is the intro to Sport England's sustainability strategy. As I say, I've had a look to see which of the national governing bodies already have a sustainability strategy and talking to their members. British Rowing is one of the partners to the Clean Water Sports Alliance. And when you look at that reach through those members, 450,000 members, that is a lot of people to talk about climate change and nature recovery too. Who are the game changers, though? Who isn't joining in the conversation? And although there are football clubs that are making some waves, there isn't necessarily a strategy yet, but I'm going to be looking, and I'd love to know whether anybody else would like to contribute to this list and or be speaking to their governing body. So football I think about, rugby I think about, although world bodies are getting in on the conversation, that's yet to come down to the national body and then on to its members. We've already got questions. I'm trying to think how long I've been talking. Gosh, is it 20 minutes already? I'm so sorry. I could talk about this endlessly. If you'd like me to talk about the podcast, I can do, but I'd rather you listen to it. I'd rather open the floor to questions, and I'd rather have a conversation than me carry on talking. I could probably fill another 40 minutes about sport and sustainability and communities, but I'd rather take questions if that's all right. Shall I stop sharing and see some faces?
Well, let me come in, Claudine, and say thank you so much for that. I think you're going to get quite a vigorous conversation, frankly. And I'll open the door to everyone to go ahead. As you can see, there's a very busy chat session with lots of links and ideas for people. It's nice to see that the villains as well as the heroes are being mentioned. And the first question is going to come from Andrew.
Hi guys, well done, Claudine. It's fascinating stuff. I think you've been underselling yourself, frankly, but there we go. Yes, the issue around, as we know also from speaking with Sport England, there's an issue around football. People wanting to keep playing their matches. People are constantly concerned at having artificial pitches because of changes in the weather. But some of these pitches, the artificial pitches, are filled with rubber crumb, which then, if it escapes, gets into the water systems. And it seems to me that I doubt there's a bit of tension within Sport England at the moment. On the one hand, they've got ideas for how to manage the situation. On the other hand, they're offering grants for putting new such artificial pitches in. So I think that is a great issue and contradiction within that sport. And if the Football Association isn't getting involved in having sustainability strategy, that's probably reason number one why they're not doing it, because that hasn't been resolved. There is always the thing about money, isn't there? What we know, it doesn't matter whether it's sport, whether it's retrofitting our houses, whether it's nature recovery, there isn't money enough in anybody's pot to pay for it all. So we do need to find other ways of doing it. It's all very well people like myself thinking about kickabout football games around and kickabout, on bits of games of cricket on on playing ground or whatever it is. That I think we need to have the broader joined up view. Where is it that we can actually make a difference on the ground? Because I think, say we need more money so that we can have better sports facilities which react against the climate change, is a bit of and therefore we get more Olympic stars, and we can say that, but I strongly suspect there isn't enough money to achieve that.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Stuart.
Hi, yeah, thanks for that talk. Yeah, I must say, until very recently, it's not an area which I have thought much about in relationship to climate change. But I'm just in the process of reading Dale Vince's book, Manifesto, and he actually bought a football club. I think it's Forest Green. He's built a new stadium, I think designed by Norman Foster or somebody like that. And it's basically a huge wooden zero carbon new stadium. He's been installing wind turbines, solar panels. He's planning to get a team bus, battery electric. So I think these things are not impossible, but they obviously need quite a lot of pump priming or capital funding, which is not a problem for him. But he has set up the Sustainability in Sports Foundation as a charity to maybe poke for a bit of funding. And he's also set up the Green Britain Foundation, which I was just checking out on the charity's website, has about £8 million.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. So I'm making notes as we go, because certainly this is where, if we're going to approach grassroots clubs, particularly, because I'm always thinking about how do we reach people and how do we reach different people, the ones that we're not normally talking to. So although I absolutely agree that the vast majority of clubs are not going to be able to afford any kind of stadium like that, however, it's the example that it's setting. It's the normalizing as well. All of those supporters that are going in and out of that club, that they are looking at a different way of operating sport, and also a different way of just being at the sport, being a participant in that sport.
Another thing he did was over time make the club vegan.
Yeah.
So all the food and drink served at the matches is vegan, and apparently it's actually attracting people to the game rather than putting people off.
I wonder if people are still shouting out from the stands, who ate all the pies? Anyway, carry on.
Imogen Grant, who is the gold lightweight double partner, is actually an ambassador for the Rivers Trust, and she is vegan, and she's a doctor.
Yeah.
So again, when we're thinking about ambassadors, when we're thinking about people who can lead the change, who have a following that is not necessarily on an environmental platform, but she is a champion for her sport, but also for the climate, this is where we reach a lot more people, and a lot younger people as well. So I just think, well, let's work together. Even thinking about locally, what knowledge do we have amongst us about buildings and about funds and about pitches? If we can work with our local sports clubs and share that knowledge, but also the way out of it, the way that local clubs can actually help tackle climate change, then you're helping them to change the game. So yeah, the more that we can share this knowledge, amongst us to help our communities on this. So many clubs are thinking they're too busy thinking about fixing the leaking roof, or how do we cover the shortfall in our funding for the year because we haven't been able to hold this fundraising event. And this is also happening. So we've got to work with all our various tiers of local authority. I do note, of course, when I look at town and parish councils, that they have the powers to provide recreational facilities and support. So again, when we think about our local communities, how can we work at our most local tier of local government, but also with our district and counties to support the grassroots clubs for the good of the community, health and well-being, social cohesion, so many benefits, but also tackling climate change at the same time. So I'm making a huge note of, I had known about Forest Green, but because it wasn't at national body level, I just think he's an exemplar, and let's hope that we can derive as many good practice notes from that as possible.
Yeah, Stuart, thank you so much for bringing that example out. You've triggered several comments in the chat column about ways that other people are providing funding for energy efficient stadiums and so forth. So congratulations. Thank you. Amanda, your turn, please.
I'm shocked at myself for not having really thought this before. And just the fact that you volunteered to take part and be here today has triggered so many, it's like a new lens to see through all the matrices of because I'm very involved in lots of this sort of these angles. So just to prove, yeah, that's my GB European medal. I've got 2 golds. Well, I haven't. There's 22 of us in the team for dragon boating. With one example is when I was in the squad, but I couldn't be in the team for some races because the weather was too hot in Tampa, and I'm this colour, and we're out for hours on the water without being able to get any shade. And we had to train with weights in a sauna in a local gym in preparation for it. So these are some of the practical examples of how weather and international competition, I mean, it's not a level playing field when somebody's out there in Tampa used to that, they're acclimatised. We then had the possibility of going over 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, but who can afford that much time off work and the hotel bills but just to acclimatise, because it was shocking. I was living in the north of England at the time, and I had to fly from Newcastle every weekend down to London to take part in the national squad training. And in the end, I actually gave up my job and I moved to West London because I was so embarrassed, so hateful of myself and the travel involved. But when you've got a national squad, I was on the same plane every time with the Newcastle football ladies. And so we were all GB teammates, but not in the same sport. And we were all flying, and we were all saying, this is awful. How can we do something different? So in the end, I moved from my lovely farm school up in Northumberland, state school, but with a boarding wing and a farm, to live in Runnymede, in West London. And I taught at a very difficult school in Staines-upon-Thames. And so I dragon boat paddled because the British team was based down there at Runnymede there's a good raised buoy skip and punt club. It goes to, we share a lot of the same water and competitions. But my points, to be very precise, are when I was living up in the northeast, the flooding meant that Carlisle Football Club and the ground there, they were without, and that was quite a high up in the league's team to be without a football ground for a long time. And they were getting repeatedly flooded. So they were having to reconsider how do they put up bunds, what do they do? Because once it overtops the bunds, of course, you've got then a lovely deep pond that keeps the water there forever. So if it does flood, you're really stuffed. You're just making it worse. So they were looking into they've got a lot of creative ideas about how to make grounds water resilient, let's say flood resilient. Then also I would say the light pollution and biodiversity that sports with their big lights, especially if they've got evening matches or if they do fundraising like some of our community sports do, but they're still big enough. Our football grounds got big lights. But what they do now is if they've got an evening event on, they used to put the lights on. Whereas now, because of the pollution to our village and our dark sky status, they go into the clubhouse and they just put up little strings of lights if they're going to have a barbecue outside. So they've taken part in preventing light pollution. And then WASP, which is Windrush Against Sewage Pollution, we've been working with Fergal Sharkey and Lee Day, the solicitors, having the class action currently on anybody that's using or recreationally using, living by, or otherwise affected by the River Wye and the pollution from the chicken farms. So again, anybody who's over in that area has ever kayaked over there, walked a dog over there, or wanted to just enjoy that area is invited to contact Lee Day and take part in this class action. You simply only need to have walked along the riverbank before and gone, ooh, and that is enough to take part in the class action. You know, basically anybody, polluter has got to pay. We only get to know, and they only get to pay if we shout about it. So that's what that's about. So it won't cost you anything to take part in the class action. It's a no-win, no-fee sort of basis. Then Mid Counties Co-op. I'm a director, elected director with Mid Counties Co-op. We're just funding, you know, the dividend you get from the co-op. So what we've said is, because most people are only getting, you know, £1.80 or something, we're pooling it all. So the first 1,000 points are going into a big community fund, community sort of for good. And part of that, because we're a values-based membership organisation, the co-op, I'm on the body that's awarding the funds. So basically, if we can encourage sustainability-based bids from sports clubs, I can get that onto the criteria for, you know, I can propose it. It's a democratic organisation, so thank you for that idea. And also just to respect fellow paddlers and rowers all around the country and around the world who are cleaning from the rivers to the sea so that plastics and other pollution in our rivers don't get out to sea. And finally, all these sports places with great big green spaces within our community, we would really hate it if they got built on, wouldn't we? So considering green space designation, we got one of ours designated as a green space, and now it's not going to be allowed to be built on ever. So that's something parish and town councils could do. So I always take up far too much time. Those are my ideas. Now I'm going to be quiet. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Incidentally, for future reference, there's a huge echo on your voice. If you can find out why you've got two microphones switched on or something like that, that would be much easier for everyone to listen to.
Okay. Yeah, it's not the first time I've been told that, but I haven't got anything else on. I'll look into it. Thank you.
Okay. Jules, your turn, please.
Thank you. Hi, Claudine. Thanks so much for your talk. It was really interesting. I kind of semi-introduced myself at the start, but not very well. I'm Chief Executive of the Community Rail Network. So we're a national organisation that supports communities to get involved in different ways with their local railways and stations, and we help communities to have a voice on rail development and support all sorts of community-led projects linked to the railways and sustainable travel. And I also chair the Sustainable Transport Alliance, which is a group of 8 national charities and organisations involved in different aspects of sustainable and inclusive transport and travel. So I'm particularly interested in the transport and travel aspects of what Sport England are doing under the new strategy. And it would be great to perhaps have a follow-up conversation about that, or if you're able to direct me to the relevant person at Sport England to talk to. I was interested to know, and I don't know if you're able to answer this, or it might be something to refer me on to someone else, but I was interested to know the extent to which we've got data on the extent of an impact of transport and travel to sports events and matches. I mean,
I'll check the Game Changer report.
Sorry?
I'll certainly check the Game Changer report.
Yeah,
is where I would look there and
I'm
base
sure,
this.
yeah, I'm sure we'll all around the virtual table be conscious of the impacts within our local areas. I mean, you know, seeing kind of traffic on match days going out in and out of cities and towns, it's quite astounding. But I mean, even at that grassroots level, I'm thinking about my local cricket club, where they have I mean, half of their green space is taken up at matches with car parking. You know, and they've just raised a huge area of which was all long grass and wildflowers in order to make space for more cars. You know, and this is somewhere it's just off a local bus route, and I just think it's a huge underappreciated issue in terms of the amount of pollution that's being created through
absolutely
sport at all levels in terms of the transport and travel. And yeah, so I'd be interested in having a conversation about what actions are being taken forward by Sport England to provide advice and leadership to local clubs through to, you know, big big clubs and big sports associations on that specific issue. And I can see from your strategy that there is attention being paid to active travel, and obviously there's that link through to Active Travel England. But I just wonder if there are conversations happening in terms of public transport and the scope for help making public transport cater better for people accessing sports. And of course that has a big impact in terms of accessibility and inclusion as well as sustainability. Yeah, and so encouraging local sports clubs to be working with local transport operators and authorities and influencing them and saying, you know, this is what we need in order
Indeed.
to you know, in order for our players, our audiences to be making greater use of public transport. So yeah, there's a few points.
I have realized that I have focused on presenting what's happening currently, but what I didn't address, but we do talk about in the podcast, is the solutions. So clubs can absolutely encourage lift sharing and make it explicit as well. If they have a sustainability strategy or an environmental policy, or just even 5 actions that we can take now, which British Rowing, I've got a nice picture on my phone that came out of the conversations as a volunteer manager at an event. How can we encourage the many thousands that attended to reduce their carbon footprint of not just themselves, but of the event, by encouraging more people to travel together, to use public transport? But we know it's not that easy to access.
Well, and
places,
hence the kind of influencing, which I think, you know, it's got to be that two-way thing, encouraging clubs to do what they can, but also saying, well, look, you know, if the options are constrained by the local service provision, then use your voice, you know, talk to your operators and encourage them to be more responsive to your needs.
And I would certainly say, when we think about inclusion, for those, that's fine if you're able to access your club or your event, if you have the means to do so, and that includes a car, that includes the money to actually attend the event. But a district or a county might be looking at a sports strategy, and talking about inclusion. How can we make it more accessible to everyone? So not just physical, but social inclusion policies. And I don't know much other than there are ways that a club can promote it, but in terms of liaising with its district council or county or bus network or any kind of public transport, that's where you would hope that the local environmental group could work with the local club, because that's actually something that they've got in common, that they want to see increased public transport, they want to see better routes. Your local sports club is probably they've got to be pretty committed to be able to navigate their way to get to that conversation. And certainly from a national body, that would be great if they could start making noise about that need. So I don't know. I think, Jules, if we could also have a conversation, that'd be great. And maybe in a couple of months' time, we can hone this to a community strategy, that we could also work with Sport England and the national bodies to say, at a community level, these are the things that would make it easier for communities to you know, if they're renovating facilities, what's easy for them? How do we make it easy to find funding? How do we make it easy for them to work on transport solutions? It's not easy to unpick. And if we don't know the answers in this group, just imagine your average football section or your average cricket club or your average, you know, kayaking group. They're too busy actually just managing volunteers, making sure everyone's safe, organizing the event to actually tackle this stuff. So we all have to be helping them, really. I think there's a real role for us to play. Oh, I see.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm saying that, so the organisation that I'm part of and the organisations that we partner with, we can facilitate that dialogue, that interaction between grassroots sports clubs and transport operators.
Great.
So yeah, a follow-up conversation on that would be brilliant with the relevant person. Thanks.
We just hang on 1 second, please, that Tim is about to leave. Did you want to grab the second, Tim, before you go?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting, because sports is one of the areas which I think we've done some support work through the Community Energy Fund to give some funding for feasibility studies and the like, to actually enable clubs to do something with their existing infrastructure at that lower level. We've also been contacted by Sport England at Lillishall, so a bit of a national level thing. So I think things are going on. It's just, how do we actually get the national level bodies and the ground level people working together, and if there's a role for the Midlands Net Zero Hub or the other net zero hubs around the UK to actually help you do that, then that's sort of what we're here for. So Claudine, I definitely want to have a chat with you and get in touch with you again, have a better conversation, maybe bring you into the hub as well to see how that could work.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Tim. And Jonathan, you've been trying very hard to get a word in sideways.
Hello. Hi, Claudine. Hi, everybody. Very good talk. Very interesting indeed. I've been wondering whether you, Claudine, or anybody else is aware of local clubs doing any resilience studies, climate resilience studies, to actually try and, ahead of the game, assess the impact of what things might be like 10, 20 years into the future, so that, you know, they can, you know, perhaps begin to develop a plan for adaptation, etc. Did you hear that?
Yes, I was just wondering whether you were going to ask me to reply, or anyone else had
Anybody,
Oh, Tim, are you saying goodbye, or are you saying yes? I've got a. Oh, okay. Great to meet you. Bye. Adaptation. I was going to say, well, again, I realized I put questions up, and I really thought, not to actually talk about the solutions that are being offered, that actually there are various club level solutions, and when it becomes real for them, it becomes personal, and they have more of a stake in wanting to do something about it. When it's remote, not that interesting. When it's your club that's flooded, when your match has been called off for the 3rd time, you start thinking about solutions. How can I help? Adaptation, I would say certainly within rowing, there is mitigation, because the water is there. There is stuff within the water. You might fall into it, but you might not. What you tend to do is actually come up with the strategy. If you fall in, what do you do? So there's adaptation that way, and mitigation. In terms of your premises, clearly there's adaptation that could be incorporated into whether it's thinking about flooding, preventing flooding. Can you put in, just even thinking about rainwater harvesting for cricket clubs to be able to water your pitch during the summer. There's, I don't know of any great examples, is probably.
I was thinking a bit more about risk assessments in a way.
Oh, in which case those are Yeah, those
Yeah.
are and certainly British Rowing at the club championships, that was actually part of it. What happens if we do experience extreme heat? What are the where are the water taps? Literally, so that athletes can use their reusable water bottles. How can we make sure that there is enough shade, for example? Just even at a local level, if we can't compete outdoors, what's the indoor alternative, or just even for training? So that is being discussed, I would say, within some clubs. I don't know what the reach is, but it certainly needs to be a strand of sustainability within sport, is how do we adapt? It has to be. But it's happening more and more often. So, particularly when you think about safeguarding and when you've got youth sections, you do have a responsibility as a coach and as a club to look after your junior athletes. So again, I'd love to find more material, and I've written adaptation down to find examples. Again, thinking about the great collaboration, pointed somebody towards a biodiversity policy. There could be more policies and procedures. I would say Sport England's Buddle, which is a club, it's a new iteration of Club Matters. So it's guidance for club committees that provide help on these sort of topics. And I'm going to go and have a look and see what they've got on adaptation.
Okay.
Thanks, Jonathan, very much. Amanda. We've lost you completely this time.
Oh, no.
Okay.
There you go.
You're probably going to have that echo again, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I'll be quick. So many clubs have got clubhouses, and so many of them could do with reducing their energy bills. That is the pump priming of getting the solar up there. And these are the sorts of things that we've had talks on before, and whether we could do more to direct and sort of signpost, network, and put people together, so that the sources of the knowledge and the funding to make it easy for the clubs to get solar up on their roofs, or even to get a turbine in the corner of the pitch, whatever. But just some ideas there, and even down to composting, because they'll be mowing a lot, and are they doing the composting in the right way so it doesn't create more methane, and other such things. And it's knowing what I'm doing. It's a very simple thing that most people have already done and we're catching up on, is just to form a community network of people who've got knowledge. And then that way, when you've got that directory or network of people that have got knowledge, then those clubs that just have that instant knowledge can reach out and say, do you know who could help us with? And
Agreed.
it's like this, but
It
this
is,
is on the national level, and it's just making sure that we've got a way of having that conversation locally. And I also wanted to say that one of the issues with water-based sport is we used to have, so with risk management, we used to have a situation where if you had red boards, when the water was in flood to such a degree that it was deemed unsafely high or fast, for those that don't know what red boards are, then we would say if it's on red boards, we don't go out. Whereas now the adaptation to our policies are, we go out if we've got a qualified helm, and if everybody's wearing their life jackets, and if everybody is signed up to say they can swim.
Yeah.
So we've lowered our bar, because we couldn't just use that clumsy, oh, it only happens a few times, so we'll just say red boards, no going out. And now we've had to find a way of going out despite that risk, but we've managed the risk in a more managed, thoughtful way. That means we can still go out despite there being a lot more flash flood sort of situations.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, in terms of connecting the dots locally, agreed on the guidance. What I will say is, of course, sports clubs, as I've just mentioned, are pretty busy just maintaining. It's quite hard to look forward when they know they have to fundraise just to fix the roof. If you want that roof to be a green roof or to include rainwater harvesting, they'll generally turn around and say, we haven't got the time or money or knowledge for the fancy stuff. So how can we make it easier for these clubs to access the guidance they need. One of the easy ways of getting in, though, is the Making Space for Nature. So I have used the South Gloucestershire Council's Business for Nature Action Plan, which is a really good way of conducting an audit of your premises to see how you can make space for nature. Can you include a bat box? Can you include a Swift box? Can you put the composting? What can you make? Can you plant just even bee-friendly plants? Can you also communicate that to your members? One of the great conversations that's happened within our club was actually about washing our boats. So the washing up liquid that was being used is actually harmful to aquatic life. Now, because I don't buy that product, it never even occurred to me to look. The minute I looked, I went, "Ooh, why are we using this?" Now, you can change it and say nothing, or you can change it and communicate to all of your 300, 500, however many members, what you're doing and why. And once again, it's engaging with a committed group of people and starting to change that thinking. Because once people start, as we know, once people start on their climate or nature journey, then they generally start looking forward for the next step. So if you can find a way to have that conversation, and we did within the boat club, and then that translated upwards into British Rowing, the conversation about which is the best product to use, it's ended up with a partnership with Delphis. So British Rowing and Delphis, who are normally business to business, but business to club also works. So you can get washing up liquid or even cleaning products in large quantities. So you're cutting down on plastic, you're messaging with your members, and you're raising awareness that actually even washing up liquid can be harmful to our water quality. So what can you do in your household to actually change, to tackle climate change and improve nature? So it's not just the carbon emissions, it's also, again, coming back to, can sport be a hero? I would say yes, it absolutely can be. So we need the national heroes, but we also need our local heroes, just actually making sure that they're having the conversations with committees, with members.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claudine. David, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, good afternoon. 2 points. While I've been talking to Andrew, whilst you've been away, Graham, first of all, it's becoming really apparent that many of these issues are subsets of a much bigger integrated set of problems, which I think we need to start to map and look at. So, for example, biodiversity, linking in with how do we use large patches of ground which are used for playing fields, whatever they are, to contribute to that biodiversity conversation, and also the net zero in terms of a general awareness, maximizing sort of things. So a lot of this is generic and will fall across, multiple areas. So I think it's just yet another part of the complex weave that we need to understand and see how that plugs into the whole. From a human factors perspective, I'm not that concerned really about rising temperatures. Having in a previous life been a military GP deploying thousands of troops into various unpleasant parts of the world with temperatures going up to 45, 50 degrees centigrade, as long as you have clear protocols in place in terms of adapting people moving from one temperature to another, the Mark I human is actually extremely adaptable and will function very effectively. What you might want to look at, I don't know whether you've ever come across the WBGT measurement for activity at times. It's a wet bulb globe temperature. And it's used extensively in the military and environmental health to determine the level of activity that should be taking place based on both the temperature and humidity, because they both have a major impact in terms of your ability to not fall over with heat stroke. And so you can, if you've got access to that measurement decide whether a particular sport should take place or not, or take place if you've actually had the appropriate adaptation period. It's a bit difficult in the UK, where you go from a very cloudy, quite pleasant day to a day where it's 34 degrees centigrade all of a sudden, because of course you don't have that day, the days that you need in order to physiologically adapt to suddenly being at 34 all the time. So those are my two points.
I agree, and I hear what you were saying about the immediate impact on sports teams. What I'm thinking about probably, though, is the fact that those extreme temperatures affect the actual pitch. And you think about extreme heat affecting your cricket pitch or football, and it becomes difficult to play on, whether it's waterlogged or whether it's baked. I'm also thinking about golf, coastal erosion, the fact that changing temperatures mean that areas, whether it's even river, when we're thinking about the erosion of soil, and therefore conditions just become more dangerous and difficult, particularly for local sports people. And it doesn't take much to be put off, especially kids. There's quite a lot of numbers contained within some of those reports about how activity is falling off. So there is a sort of wider impact, apart from it's a way of getting attention, isn't it, to our local sports people, that actually extreme weather does affect play. And especially when you think about our younger generation, that we are trying to encourage many of them to be more outside. And when it's actually coming down cats and dogs, it's quite difficult for parents to get their kids outside. Or if it's baking, there's a reluctance to send them outside. So I guess I'm thinking about it on a number of levels, about how it's affecting national sport, but how it impacts, therefore, on our local area and our future generations, that we do want them participating in whatever sport or recreational activity it is. But I have made a note of it. In terms of fields as well, mapping opportunities, playing fields don't have to be just for sport, they can be for recreation. Parks are also being used in Scotland, for example, as energy sources. So wouldn't it be great if local communities could start thinking about their playing fields as not just nature and recreation, but potential sources of energy? So, but that, again, those are conversations. It's too much to have in your first conversation when you're talking to a sports club about a leaking roof. But you can start talking about it to maybe your local tree action group. And that has happened locally here in Warwickshire, where a sports club had some spare land and are working with the tree action group about planting. Then you start talking about natural flood management solutions. So people working together is probably the ultimate point of this conversation, because I don't participate on a national level, but I do participate at a grassroots level. But we need our national bodies to help us make impact. We need more working together. On that note, it's 1:05. Are there any more conversations or contributions? But I would love to do this again in maybe a couple of months' time, when I can provide more in the way of solutions.
Well, congratulations, Claudine. You've managed to fill all the minutes very successfully, despite your worst fears, and very entertainingly, actually. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. We will continue with all the sessions each week. Next week, Ed Gembles is coming to chat to us. Perhaps Andrew can just very briefly say what about.
Ed is a very powerful speaker. He's been engaged a great deal in the climate issues. He was heavily involved in the early development of B squares, whereby we could have everybody would have a simple yard square of wildflower patches to encourage the bees to migrate and to move around. He's also been very much in favour of local authorities having targets for net zero. He is also the leader of the Climate Party, which had a number of candidates in at the general election. They didn't get elected this time, but he tells me that they're going to be carrying forward. He's also, hopefully, if we're going to get continued the local net zero forum with the Department of Energy under the new regime, which I haven't been told yet. He's also the candidate to be on the ministerial forum, as he's a councillor. He can't be on the officer forum. He can be on the ministerial forum. So, but he's worthless to it. He is a very, very powerful speaker. So he will be very interesting to hear what he has to say to us next week.
Great. Well, thank you so much to everybody for showing up, particularly to Claudine for jumping in to save the day. And appreciate all of your time and your comments. We will get the wiki up to date one of these days, certainly. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much for your time.
Carry up.
Thank you, Claudine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.